G'day, I'm Yuki-san Dev, and in part 22 of this series, Unity for the Absolute Beginner, we will be taking a first look at animation. Okay, well, here's something completely new, animation. Just like sound and particles, what would a game be without some kind of animation? Now, animation for the beginner can be a right royal pain in the butt. It's a fairly big subject, and to make matters worse, there's a lot of ways to do it. So today we'll make a start on it using Unity's built-in animation system. Well, we all know what animation is. I mean, spinning a cube in the game using addForce.talk is animation, but we're probably thinking more along the lines of people's legs moving when they're walking, or lips moving when they're talking, running, jumping, etc. So firstly, as a beginner, you're probably not going to be creating animatable models, so let's start with downloaded assets that have some kind of animation on them already. So let's get into it. So in a new 3D project, click on Window and Animation. So before we get a model, let's look at the two main animation windows. So here we have two systems. Let's click the Animator. So this is where you're going to see or make new states. States being the state that the model is in, i.e. it's walking, it's running, it's jumping, slashing, etc. And you're also going to be able to view or set the conditions for those states, i.e. maybe the running state has a condition that the model's speed is greater than 5, or is running equals true, or something along those lines. Now in a perfect world, your model will already come with some states already set up, but unfortunately a lot don't. So we will cover that shortly. Now let's click the animation window. So this is where you will view, change, or create the actual animations. Then they can be added to the animator. Alright, so that's enough yakking. Let's get something to play with. So let's get into the Asset Store by clicking Window and selecting Asset Store. And that should open up your web browser and search the Asset Store for 5 animated voxel animals. And you should get this free pack here from Voxel Guy. Now I've already got this pack installed, so you should be seeing something like add to my assets or download or something like that. And then open with Unity. Then from your package manager, import them into your project. And again, as in previous videos, if you have any issues getting this pack from the Asset Store, then you can get the pack from my GitHub link in the description. You can download it and then open your Unity up and then double click that pack from your File Explorer and it should open it up in Unity and you can import it from there. So after a successful import, you should have a folder in your project named Voxel Animals. Expand that folder and work your way down to Assets, and then Models, and then drag the chicken into your project hierarchy. Also, if you have your Animator tab open, you can just switch back to the scene here. Now, you might have to rotate your chicken a little depending on your camera, etc. Also, you might like to create a plane in the hierarchy so it looks like he's standing on something. And also set up your camera angle for the game display to your liking. So I'm just going to do that real quick. Cool. Now, click the chicken in the hierarchy. So in this case, the animator component didn't come with it. But no worries. Click the Add component and add an animator. Now click the controller tool to see if the chicken came with its own controller. And yep, there it is, chicken. So double click it to select it. And now just for the hell of it, let's push play and see if it's already set up with some kind of idle animation. Cool, it is. It's kind of bouncing up and down. Alright, let's see what else is in the animator. So click Window, Animation, and select Animator. Or if it's still open as a tab, just click on the tab to switch your view. Okay, cool. So we already have an idle, a walk, and a jump state. Awesome. Alright, so firstly, you can zoom in and out just by using your mouse wheel. And if you middle click and hold, you can drag the canvas around, and you can click and hold any state to drag it around. Don't worry, it won't change anything. It's just purely for layout. So click on the chicken idle state. And now in the inspector, you can see the motion that's associated with it. And there's some settings there you can play with. Speed you will use quite a lot to pair it with how you are using it in the game. Change it to 5, for instance, and then run the game. And the chicken bounces quicker. Alright, I'll put that back to 1. Now double click the idle state and it will open up the clip where you can preview it. Now you might need to drag the preview window up to see it. And sometimes you will get a message in the windows to say that there's no model. If so, just drag the chicken from the hierarchy into the window and you're good to go. And push the little play button here to see the animation. And of course you can see all the other states in the same way. Alright, so the orange state in the window is the default state when the model is loaded. So let's say we wanted to change the default state to chicken walk, then we would just simply right click on chicken walk and select set as layer default state. We won't do that right now though, because there are probably conditions for it to walk, so it wouldn't work. So what are the lines with the arrows? Well, they are the transitions and the transition conditions. Click on the line between the chicken idle and the chicken walk with the arrow facing towards chicken walk. And in the inspector, you can see the transition and the condition for it to happen. And you can drop down settings and have a play with the transitions. Let's have a look at the condition. So in order for this chicken to do the walk animation, it's just a simple integer called walk, and it has to equal 1. Conditions for states can be integers, floats, bools, or triggers. So we can make a script now to animate this chicken. So let's make a script for this chicken and control these animations. So create a C# script and call it chicken, I guess. And then drag it onto the chicken object and open the script. Alrighty, so we're going to need the animator component. So let's do private animator and we'll just call it anim. And then in start, type in anim equals get component animator. So now we have that component stored in the variable anim. And now all we do is anim dot set integer and then in parenthesis walk in speech marks and the number 1. So you remember the integer value for the walking animation had to be 1 and it was called walk. So we just set it. And also when you're doing these things, make sure you spell them right and the capitalization also matters as well. So let's save this and run. Cool. Chicken is walking. It's kind of an odd walk. So let's do something else. Let's make it do the jump animation when we press the spacebar. So if we click the line between any state and chicken jump, we can see that it's just a trigger and the trigger name is jump. All right, cool. Back into the script. So in update, let's just do a quick input code. If you have been following the series, this should look pretty familiar. All right, so when the spacebar is pressed, we're going to set that trigger off. So let's do anim dot set trigger, and then the trigger name was jump, and I think it had a lowercase j. Alrighty, and save, and run, and press the spacebar, and we get the jumping animation. Cool. Of course, you would also have some code in there to make the bird actually go up in the air when it jumps to make it look like it's actually really jumping. And also to suit your game, you would be playing with the motion times and transitions to get it just right. And back to the walk and idling, if you click the other line with the arrow heading back from the chicken walk to idle, you can see the condition to make it stop walking and return to idle. Now the other two colors here, well, there's the any state, and that's just as it suggests. From any state that the chicken is in, it can jump. So it can be triggered anytime without any other conditions. The chicken walk, for example, has to be idle before it can walk. The green entry and the red exit states, well, you don't really need to worry about those at this stage. It's really only when you're getting into multiple sub-state machines, and then they will become more of use. We will cover that in another video. So now let's have a look at the animation window where we can edit, change, or create a new motion. So click Window, Animation, and select Animation. And if your window is empty, make sure you have the chicken selected in your hierarchy, and then it should show up. So you can select the animation from here that you want to play with. Let's choose Chicken Idle if it's not already selected. And if you click the play button in the animation, it will play it on the chicken in your editor. You can drop down the parts that are being animated here to see them. Now, I won't take you through the animation editor. That would just be pretty much a dedicated video or even a series. But with a bit of playing around, it's not too hard to figure out. But what we will do is create a quick new, very basic kind of new motion and add it to the animator with a state. So click the drop down and select Create New Clip. And just accept the default path for now and give it a name. I'm going to call mine Preen. And click Save. Alright, now click Add Property and select Head, then Transform, and then click the plus button for rotation. Cool, so now we can control the rotation of the chicken's head. Now if you expand it, you can see the 3 axes. Now click up here around about halfway between the start and end keys to move the time, or you could just enter a 30 up here. Then right click inside the window on the same line as the head rotation heading and select Add Key. This will add a key to the X, Y, and Z axes. If you've ever used a video editor or some kind of animator before, you will know all about keyframes. These keys are pretty much keyframes. Now change rotation X and Y to 45. And now if you drag your timeline around, you will see that the editor has automatically created a smooth transition between the 3 keys. 0 to 45 and 45 back to 0. If you want to play with that auto transition, you can click the Curves tab here and change it to make it more to your liking. You could make it a sharp move, you could make it go from slow to fast, fast to slow, all sorts of combinations you could try in there. Okay, so we have our very basic animation called Preen. Kind of looks like a bird preening itself for a split second, maybe. Now let's add this animation to the animator so that we can use it. So let's close the animation window and get back into the animator. Now you probably found that in the animator has already picked up your new motion and slammed it in there. So let's click on it and delete it so we can learn to edit manually. So you can either drag the animation clip straight into the animator from your project window, or you can select the clip in your project window and right click inside the animator window and select Create State, and then select from selected clip. Or you could even just create an empty one and then assign it in the inspector and rename it. Cool, so double click it and we can see a preview of it. Alright, so we only want this preening to happen when the chicken is idle. So right click the chicken idle state and select Make Transition and then drag the line onto our new preen. Now we'll need a condition for the preening to happen, so let's use a trigger since we don't want this thing to loop. So click the Parameters tab if you're not already in it, and click the plus button to add a new trigger. And I guess we'll call it Preen. Now click on the transition line we just made between the chicken, idle, and the preen, and then in the inspector, click the plus button to add the condition, and select Preen. And that's it. It's ready to be triggered in-game in a script. So let's get back into the chicken script. Now we'll have to disable the chicken from walking, otherwise the preen won't work, because remember the chicken has to be idle. So let's just rem this line out. And then in our spacebar code, let's just replace this trigger name here from jump to preen. And save. And run. Alright, so it's working, but the chicken keeps doing it over and over. Why? Because we haven't set a return transition. So we just simply right click on the preen state and select make transition, and then drag the line back to idle. So now after the animation is finished, it will return to idle. And click play again. Okay, so there's one more issue here. When you press the spacebar, it takes a while before the preening starts. If you have a look in the animation editor at the idle animation, you'll see that it's around about a 3-second animation, and it's not going to run that preen state until it's done finishing one idle cycle. But no worries. Click on the transition line between chicken idle and preen again. So that's where these settings here come into play. Now the quickest fix is just to disable has exit time here. And now it won't wait for that idle animation to finish. And play. Cool. So you will have to play with these settings depending on your circumstances that you're faced with. You might not want to be disabling has exit time, but you have other options here to play with. And of course, if this were a real game, then that preening would probably happen at random times when the chicken was idle using script. So yep, just remember a lot of these animated bits and pieces you will find on the asset store will not always be complete for one reason or another, and some of them will be using techniques you haven't learnt yet. Another one I recommend having a play with, and of course it's free, I'll leave a link in the description for it, is the free animated 2D zombie. It's a good one to play around with. The animation clips are already in there along with the states, but there are no transitions. So you get good practice setting up your own transitions with conditions for the states. Also, this is a 2D model, so better to play with it inside the scene that came with the pack, if you're not familiar with 2D. Now, one other thing, if the model you have downloaded has animations but no controller, you can just simply create a controller in your project by right-clicking and adding a controller. And then just simply start adding the animations to it. Alright, well that was a pretty quick overview of the basic animation system. I kind of feel like it was a bit rushed, so if you do have any questions, feel free to drop me a line in my Discord, or just ask the question here on YouTube. But as you can imagine, there is a lot more to it, so as we progress through these videos, we will dive more into it. So that will do me for this video. I hope to see you in the next one.